Hope you're having an awesome day. We got John Reilly out of Hawaii. What's up, John?
Hey, good to be here.
And I'm out of Malibu, California. And John reminded me that I needed to be wearing something green, so I stuck a plant on my chest here. That's all I got. But John, you
Well,
have a lot
listen,
of you have a lot of green going on.
yeah, well, it's St. Patrick's Day, for goodness sake, and I got to celebrate it somehow. And since I can't go to the local pub and have a brew, instead I have to be here with you, Tristan.
That's
I thought I'd
right.
wear my little bit of green today, and that's why we have that. And good to see the palm tree that you have
Thanks.
for your green today.
Appreciate that. Keller Williams, Remax, Home Services side. United counter Compass Redfin rocket push with Zillow's new listing preview platform. To me, John, when I read this, it just seems like it's some because they're going to abide by the local MLS rules. That's what it said. So to me, it's just like, did anything really change? They're just siding with the MLS, the local MLS, versus siding with what Compass and Redfin are doing. It's just like they're drawing the line more clear. What do you see?
Well, when I first saw that, which was actually just it what I first thought about was the case involving Hana Holdings, and that's the Davis versus Hana Holdings, and that's the one that I think uh, uh, is going to spur a lot of activity from independent brokers about how they can come up with kind of a data distribution plan that
Hmm.
allows them internally to show listings to buyer clients that are in the network. And of course, I think Zillow was responding to that new practice because, as I understand it, uh, the Hana Holdings is going to be releasing their new Hana List uh, uh, next month in April, and I think that's a result of one of the decisions in the Davis versus Hana Holdings case,
Yeah.
which actually we're going to start seeing a lot of more activity in the area of home buyers coming in and suing, saying they were receiving less than quality representation because, prior to 2024,
Hmm.
many buyers never worked with an agent under a written agreement. They
True.
they were they were told that often that, hey, you don't have to pay anything because it's all going to be free. And in our MLS, we have this thing called the offer of compensation, in which
Hmm.
the seller has basically said what they would pay as a commission split. Well, of course, after 2024 August, when they changed the rules and eliminated the offer of compensation and now required buyer written agreements, it's a whole new ballgame. And so people are adapting.
Well, you bring up two things that I want to dig into more for just for where everything is going as far as real estate, the consumer, sellers, buyers in our world in the market. Number one is this idea of a private listing network. When I was reading the notes that you sent me earlier, I'm going to just show you what I've got here. You mentioned this, and this is where I had a question for you. The bottom it says Howard Hanna says Hana List complies with MLS policy, specifically the National Association of Realtors Clear Cooperation Policy. And then at the same time, it says they're going to be using a network called OcuCell. And when I look up OcuCell, right, this is what it looks like. Create one, publish anywhere. So it looks like they're creating their own private listing network that people can search through while maintaining the compliance with the MLS. Can you explain to me how that's happening, or do you have any insight on that by any chance?
Well, the way I see it is that this is an internal system. So with Hana Holdings, they have about 500 offices nationwide and about 15,000 agents in that network. Uh, and
Got it.
so those agents in that network are going to have the advantage, kind of like, in Compass, where they'd be able to see what are some hot properties that have just been listed with Hana Holdings, and they have going to have an opportunity to view those prior to those properties having a broader distribution when they're submitted into the MLS. So as long as they comply with the MLS rules for
Mm-hmm.
clear cooperation policy, and there are some exemptions for them. There is the exemption too for delayed listings. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so this is where it's a plan that has been set up to specifically comply with the NAR rules, and they comply with clear cooperation policy. Of
Do
course,
you
Compass, on the other hand, does not
No.
comply with those rules under their three-stage program.
Do you
Until
think
the
that
last
we
stage when they then submit it to MLS.
yeah, that's where they only comply. Do you think that we gravitate to more of a world that uses the MLS less by necessity versus choice? Is that what's happening? Because I'm sensing like the bigger Compass is getting and the more friends they're making that are aligning with their beliefs, the more power that it's eventually taking from the MLS because it's just more agents. How do you see that?
Yeah, we've tried this in the past with, if you remember, the upstream
Yeah.
policy, you know, and for various reasons that didn't succeed. Um, Ultimately, what happened with upstream, as you may recall, it was sold to NAR for being the basis for RPR. That's where RPR got all
Got it,
the
got it,
data
got it.
from that effort. But now I think we're finding that there are other ways to do it. We notice uh, with Hana Holdings, they had a contract, with OcuCell, as you mentioned. And by the way, one of my favorite people in the real estate interest, John Hutzow, is the strategy officer for them. And what they were able to do was to design a strategic plan for this broker brokerage so that they can control their own data. You know, uh, what they call all of their data. They call it a data lake, LAKE, and all of that is now controlled by HANA with this program that's been developed. And I think it serves as a model where other independents can also take a look. I mean, who owns that data? If you talk to the MLS people, MLS will say, well, wait a minute, we own the compilation of the data. And with
Hmm.
some, we even own the photographs and that. And what what this new program, as I see it, says is that actually it's the brokerage that owns the listings and the data behind those listings, and they can
Hmm.
make the decision of working with their data before. it goes into the MLS. Now, in 9 out of 10 cases, where you have the delayed listings, for example, that winds up in the MLS, right?
Yep.
But with you and your broker and your agents, if you're part of this network, you'd be able to see that listing. It's a hot listing before it's distributed in the broader marketplace. And
Hmm.
that's, I think, going to be well worth people paying attention to. I mentioned also
Hmm.
the Davis versus Hana Holdings case. As you explore that, it has perked the interest of the Department of Justice. They came out with a statement of interest in that particular case. Uh, and they basically said, hey, uh, we're going to follow this closely because when you're starting to do this and sharing it with other brokers,
Hmm.
uh, you might be setting a precedent where you're skirting a little bit of the antitrust rules, which like to have more competition amongst competing brokers.
Hmm.
And the Davis case is interesting too because one of the major issues is going to be whether or not it will be certified as a class action suit. Because even though it was filed
Hmm.
as a class action suit, it's a very difficult case to put it into class action because are there enough commonalities in the cases, or do you really have a bunch of
True.
individual lawsuits? Every fact situation is different. So I want to follow that case to see whether or not it's successful in getting certified as a class action. Because if it
Got it.
is, can you imagine how many buyers? I don't even know what the class action time period is going to be. Is it going to be over the last 5 years, or is it going to be all the
Hmm.
way back 10 years? Um,
Well, I have a question about that and then where
yeah.
it leads us next as far as lawsuits. So there are a few different possible directions, and maybe they all happen at the same time, kind of like what's happening now, or maybe it gravitates to one type of lawsuit. From everything you're seeing right now, where do you think the attorneys press more to take more and more money from our industry? Is it RESPA that they come in and press harder on, right? Which what we're watching them do with Zillow and a lot of mortgage companies. So RESPA number one. Number two, do you think it's this buyer angle that is barely opening up, which could be pretty big if it becomes a class action, right? That's number two. Number three, do you think, and maybe it's related to number two on RESPA. Number three, do you think it's the disclosures on referrals? Because that's way bigger than we really, if we think about it, big money. Because we've referred forever and we've always done it the same way. And most of the time, in most of the states, it's not disclosed, right? Or number four, and I'm pretty sure there's a whole bunch. We're watching Compass now separate itself on how it does business, but it's also, at least how I see it, it's also setting themselves up for big future problems with possible lawsuits coming after them and saying, wait a second, um, you in essence didn't do justice to my listing, Compass, where we could have gotten this much money. You only got us this amount because this is what we've seen. And all you need is a great set of attorneys to prove that. Which one of those four, if any of those four, do you think happens next at a high level?
Well, I think all of them that you mentioned are going to be uh, 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 copied over. Some of these copyright lawsuits that are forthcoming uh, from home buyers uh, are going to encompass a lot of those. And you mentioned attorneys. I think we're going to see a more active role of attorneys advising real estate brokerages. Because
Hmm.
you mentioned RESPA. There's the real estate agents really don't know about laws like that and some of
No.
the restrictions there. And so there has to be a serious level of training of agents. Otherwise, the brokerages are going to be liable. And whether or not it's for referral issues or antitrust issues.
Mm.
Uh, but the biggest one I see is something we've had for a long time, but I think it'll be mushrooming, and that is breach of fiduciary duties. Because, a lot of times people, especially in the earlier days of pre-2024, a lot of times you never had a really set relationship. If you got a lead, you worked on the lead, and you never really thought beyond that lead. But very basically, many times that lead, even if it was set up in advance, preset, um, would have generated a client relationship. And once that happens, you've got all those fiduciary duties
Hmm.
in play.
Well,
Uh,
dude, anytime you're talking about steering, not only are you talking about RESPA, but your fiduciary duty, right? That becomes a massive one. And then can fiduciary duty be proven in the lack of disclosures when a referral is involved, right? Like
mhm.
that's kind of crazy too. So, yeah, I see what
And
you're saying.
with breach of fiduciary duties against a broker, it wasn't. It's not just a fine like you would get from the Federal Trade Commission.
Hmm.
Uh, it would be where they call it disgorgement of commission, which means disgorgement means they can go after all of the commissions that were involved in the transaction and
Hmm.
and 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 take that back. So whatever you got out of that for breach of fiduciary duties, it could be forfeited, and disgorgement of commission is a heck of a penalty.
Two questions. We got Peggy. I think it's Peggy. It's just missing a P there. It says Eggy. I think it's Peggy. But John, I see this private listing as a potential fair housing problem. If a buyer wants to pursue a fair housing violation, does that fall on me, the agent, because I don't have access to as broad a list of homes? Or is my broker going to be on the hook?
Well, ultimately, the broker is going to be, on the hook, but whether or not it trickles down to the agent who did it would depend exactly on the level uh, of representation that the agent gave to the particular, buyer who was discriminated against. Um, but um, ultimately, and this is why it's so important for brokers to go over their office policy manual and update it and have it also reviewed by a local attorney who understands the real estate practice, understands antitrust rules, and now RESPA rules as well. And so that attorney must go over the office policy very, very thoughtfully.
I agree with you. Question from, well, it's more like a comment from, what was it, Bob? Bob in Georgia. What's up, Bob? in Georgia, we're not fiduciaries. So how would that apply in what we're talking about there?
Well, you'd have to examine the actual conduct of the particular agent. If the agent is shielded by state law, um, they'd have to make sure that they're in strict accordance with whether or not they're acting as a facilitator or a designated agent. You know, there are sometimes particular state rules that tend to alter that relationship and take it out of being a total fiduciary, but there still are responsibilities and obligations, and you can't cross the line. And if, for example, you're going to say, well, you know, I'm a facilitator, but it's kind of like I'm not your agent for this, but I am your agent for that. And you have to break it down and make sure that there's what they call informed consent, that the buyer really understands it. Because you know the buyers don't understand it because they even though they bought and sold many properties in the past, they never had an agreement with an agent in writing because it was generally handled right through the MLS and the offer of compensation.
Yeah.
So nowadays they'd have to carefully understand how the Georgia rule works.
Well, I just looked it up. They still have in Georgia, and by the way, if any other state doesn't have fiduciary duties, there you're going to find that they have some type of state mandate or law or something along these lines. Georgia real estate agents abide by BRRETA. It's a brokerage relationship in real estate transactions act. So instead of going all out with fiduciary duties that say they're vague, this one goes on reasonable care and skill, but still there's an act here that people need to abide by,
Well, you
which
know, my old friend dual agency, when that became a big thing with the courts,
yeah.
everybody's all the attorneys came in and said, "Oh, hey, listen, I'll write a new law in our state. We'll just call it transaction broker, or we'll just call it
Mhm.
designated agent, or we'll just call it facilitator, and we'll set up the rules in our state." And so many states jumped on board and say, well, if this gets us around the dual agency problem, you know, we'll do it. But my
Yeah.
question is, did they really understand when they consented to that? Was it really explained to them?
Yeah. Even if it was explained to them, you can still, like Bob says, how can the buyer understand it when most of us don't? It's
Right.
so true, Bob. Bob, it's a real problem, man. And I
Yeah.
think that's why in most cases everything goes back to standard of care. Like, what's the standard of care for your specific field, right? And that's where we can get into either more problems or be okay. So
Yeah. And you know, it's easy for us lawyers to say, oh, well, all you have to do is you know, disclose it. Um, but it's really how do you disclose it so that people understand it? It has to be informed consent. That's the magic element that the courts look at.
that's so
Um,
true.
or have people just said, here, just sign this piece of paper saying that you're okay with me being a transaction broker. And they don't have anything uh, where the buyer acknowledges that level of representation.
That's true.
Um, and so where we are though in practice is everybody's concerned about leads and getting leads, but it's the transition from a lead to a client that often where the failure takes place of where you take a lead, but by taking the lead, or are you making that person a client? It depends on your disclosure of it.
Mm,
But that's the transition stage we're in of taking leads, and then when do they become clients? Because once they become a client, then the fiduciary duties come into play, and that's where the liability, I think, uh, can be severe
yeah,
if not understood.
that makes sense, man. I like that. John, this was fun, man. I like it.
Well,
The
yeah,
world keeps
it's
changing.
usually I don't get a chance to talk much because my good buddy Saul,
Uh,
he loves to talk. That's why I get in the habit of sending you these little notes ahead of time, Tristan, so that
That's good.
you
Well,
kind of
it
get an
briefs
idea of
me.
what's going on, huh?
I said it briefs me. I feel like I'm in law school every time I'm getting these briefs. Because remember, we have to read all these briefs in law school before we get ready. It's like,
That's right. Yeah.
so
I
it's
always
nuts.
liked the ones where I would read that one brief would be from the plaintiff side, and I go, man, that's absolutely perfect. And then I'd read the dissent, and a dissenting judge, I'd read their opinion. I go, oh my gosh, that's perfect. Wait a minute, these guys are using their skills as uh, craftsmen, crafting language.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
It is. It is. That's why it was fun to take the bar exam in New York, California, and then Hawaii
Oh,
because it was
nice.
different in every place. Yeah.
Wow. Which one
Yeah.
was the hardest?
Well, the one in New York was, and the reason it was hard is because we took it at a law school, and it was a 3.5 day experience, and you had to write everything out in essay form, as opposed to they didn't have any multiple choice as they do right now. Uh, so
Oh, wow.
um, yeah, it was quite scary. It was also scary because uh, this was done at the height of the drafting into the Army at the Vietnam War area. So if
Oh.
and about a month after I took the New York bar, I was drafted, and I went through 8 weeks of basic training. And during that time, I found out that I was then uh, uh, past the bar. And as a result, I was able to switch from being a private into becoming a captain in the JAG Corps. And so
Oh,
that
wow.
was a yeah, that was a heck of an experience, to suddenly be a captain. And what it did was it got me out of having to do KP duty, kitchen police duty, because I went to the mess sergeant and I said, "Hey, sergeant, I know tomorrow I have I have mess responsibility, but tomorrow the general is going to pin my captain bars on me. Do you think you can give me an exemption from KP?"
What did he
And he
say?
did.
Oh,
He said, he,
that could have gone either way there, John.
no, he said, Reilly, get the hell out of here.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's
So
funny.
that was the biggest thing. It got me out of KP. And then I had
Thanks.
4.5 years in the Army.
Oh, I love
Good
that, man.
experience.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks for jumping in, everybody. Thanks for listening in. We appreciate you. Have an awesome
And
day.
as we say on St. Patrick's Day, aloha.
Aloha.